Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Pitch Please, the podcast where people who play games pitch ideas to people who make them. I'm Alex, as always. Tom's with me. Tom,
Wait,
how's it going?
You're Alex
You
as
doing right?
always? Or as always, Tom is joining you?
Both.
That sentence.
It could be both.
Okay.
I'm Alex, as always. As always, Tom's with me.
Oh, as always, I am Tom. And as always, we're joined by, as always, Chris.
Yep. These intros are getting worse somehow every week by week. They're just more insane. Hi.
Oh, that was it. I thought you were going to add something to that. Okay, no.
That's all you've got this week.
And as always, we're joined by James. As always.
Hi.
Fucking hell.
Amazing.
I figured we're leaning hard into the terrible intro.
And Alex, we got a guest. We got a guest today.
Yeah, it's been a little while.
Alex. It's Alex. We got
It's a different Alex.
Hello, I'm Alex Smith. I have the name of one of the members and some of the appearance of others. It's me, an amalgam of you lot.
You do look like what would happen if you mixed all four of us together.
And then named it Alex.
Okay, do you prefer Alex or Smith?
Whatever you guys are comfortable calling me, I don't mind. I respond to anything really.
I'm gonna go with Alex because I feel like when we had Spiff on, he preferred Tom. I feel like the real names feel.
You're setting a theme here. You're setting a rule.
Yeah, a precedent.
I'm sure that won't cause any confusion.
Yep.
Tom, I need you to fill like 30 seconds while I look for a tweet because I was going to bring something up.
Well, you can use my middle name, guys. It's Lewis.
Lewis? Is it? Sure. Sure, we can go with Lewis.
I'm a Lewis, yeah.
In terms of filling space, I mean, this is a podcast that could be edited down, Alex, but yeah, sure, we can fill some time.
I like the way that you guys are still working out like your production principles, like at this point.
It's
just like,
incredible.
Well, I mean, we could even vision mix this right now.
I mean, what episode is this? This is like episode 50 now, maybe, something like
right.
that. But James, have you made any progress in last week's big old pitch, the game that might actually get made, PP Extreme?
I have. I've got some lovely designs together.
Yeah.
We'll go through those. We'll pick our favorites. And I'll probably be making a lot of like hundreds of icons for weeks.
Nice. Perfect.
So how many games have you guys, because obviously I've been pitched this as like, hey, come get your game made by these experts. That's what sold to me. Chris Yule said,
I mean, the
we can make you a millionaire overnight. He said, no, nay, billionaire. And I was like, well, it sounds like I need to get on that podcast. So how many
Hey, look
games
at my standard of living.
have come out of these forums?
How many games have come out of this? So if this is episode 50, and I don't think it is, then the ratio is about a potential 1 out of 50. So far, an actual 0 out of 50.
And you're hoping I'm the one.
You might be. Well, last week's one might have been the 1. This might be the 2.
That was a card game, but we have had someone make
that's easy.
a prototype of a game that we did make, like we did come up with, which was John Quick Card Slinger.
That was the prototype was made for that.
Who came up with
Endless
that?
Runner, but with deck building.
Oh, we've had two because we had someone make
Pyrian's one as well.
idea.
Pyrian's one. Yeah.
Pyrian's
Which
idea,
is-
which
that was the same guy, right?
Barbara.
Okay,
Same guy, so it doesn't count.
He's been busy.
How long is it taking to find this tweet?
Do you know what? I can't find it, but I was enjoying listening to the conversation so much that I thought I'd
just a quick
keep it going.
How long do I have to explain this idea to you? Like,
As long as it takes.
is this a 1 hour podcast? Is this a 30-minute podcast? You know, that's what I'm getting at.
Okay, so basically the way it generally works is the guests will introduce the pitch, like as long or as short as you want. We'll discuss it for around an hour. It's usually a bit less.
Okay.
I mean, if you have a full game planned out, amazing. Although that's probably going to end up being like an hour of you talking.
No.
If you don't, I think generally the less you have, the better.
Okay, cool.
Because usually it ends up being a bit more like we can bring more ideas to the table. Then Chris feels like he has something to do.
I need something I can shit on, something that I can like, and then give a name to it.
What are
That's
any
generally how I
tips
go.
for like how not to explain things? Like, do you guys have pet peeves of like certain things when people say anything? Because I can imagine somebody going like, imagine like Pokemon in an Elder Scrolls world, and you're like, oh, fucking open world Pokemon game, how original! Like,
you've nailed my pet peeve.
Really?
I think that something like Skyrim but it's the future. Like, what the fuck can we do with that? Like,
It's a game with just a slightly different take on it. Well, okay, so the things that we pretty much introduce in almost every episode, which we need to get out of, and it's a bad habit, are deck building, roguelites.
No.
We've stopped doing that.
Come on, deck building roguelites have been in probably about half of the episodes that we've done.
That's because they're an untapped resource.
XCOM has come up in some way frequently.
Right.
Like those three
the
things.
Avatar Project is genius.
As has Hitman, as has Papers, Please. Those are very.
I've got different ideas. Don't worry.
What have you got for us today?
Oh, do you want me to start?
What's your pitch?
I'm going to start.
Please do.
Okay, so imagine a Skyrim world. Okay, so basically, it is a deep sea diving game, right? So essentially, you and probably three friends, maybe two friends. You go down into a diving bell and you have to perform various operations on the seafloor or around a particular object in the sea, and then come back into the diving bell and complete it, akin to how Phasmophobia works with the van and going into the house. Okay, so you have a preparation stage where you start in a saturation chamber where you choose where your ship will go, as in, do you want to go and repair pipes in the North Sea on an oil rig for $10,000, or do you want to go and dive a wreck of a ship that might have treasure on it in the Mediterranean? And essentially, you and your friends will choose a destination on a map, and then the ship will just go there, like no need to animate anything in between. It'll just sort of fade to black and fade up again. You're in the Mediterranean. It doesn't matter because you were in the saturation chamber already, so you can't see shit anyway. If you're unfamiliar with what a saturation chamber is, it's a chamber usually on a ship used to acclimatize divers to the depth they will be working at. So it allows them to easily stay at depth, because normally human bodies, when they go down to deep depth diving, they can only stay down there for a very short time before you need to start bearing in mind things like when you come back up, are you going to get the bends? How long do you need to stay down there for to allow your body to adjust to release that nitrogen to stop you from getting the bends and all this sort of stuff? So saturation diving is a way to get divers acclimatized to a certain depth so they can go down, work at that depth, come back up, no problem, just keep going up and down. But anyway, hopefully you know a little bit about diving, but essentially, so what happens is
it's underwater.
You're doing your work at depth. Now, there's a couple of important stages. So you start in the saturation chamber, and in there is where you choose your destination. You then buy any equipment, like in Phasmophobia, where you're buying equipment to go and perform your stuff. You can get stuff to make things easier, brighter lights because it's going to be very dark down underwater. Heavy shoes that allow you to walk around better on the base of the floor, or perhaps the equivalent of a jet pack, which would be something like a little propellered thing. And then after that, after you've bought your equipment, you go into the diving bell, where you have a diving bell, usually called a Bellman, who is a person that stays in the bell the entire time during the dive, controlling things, similar to staying in the van in Phasmophobia and watching through screens and directing things. The Bellman also puts out into the sea what the divers use as an umbilical cord, which has your air, some warm water, things like that to keep the diver alive, right? So the Bellman is very much sort of like working with the team, communicating with everyone, making sure they've all got what they want and know where they're going. From the bell, you dive your other two divers. So they dive through the bottom of the bell and out into the water. They're connected to the bell via a long hose, right? And that's their lifeline. They lose that, they're dead. And it's very much a part of the skill of a deep sea diver is you making sure that umbilical is, pulled around things and doesn't get wrapped and things like that. They then have to navigate in complete darkness, usually with terrible visibility because they're on the seabed floor, which means they're kicking up all the crap. So you're going to have very little visibility. Okay. And they have to navigate to the pipe or through the ship and find the objective. They then have to navigate back, come back into the bell, all the while the bellman's doing things like adjusting their oxygen, adjusting their heating, pulling pipe in, letting pipe out, right? They come back into the bell then goes back up into the ship inside their saturation chamber, and that's when they sort of reap the rewards and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, that's essentially the game.
Okay,
I'm already quite frightened just listening to that. It makes me quite uncomfortable.
I mean, when you first said the idea, I wasn't expecting Phasmophobia, but I get it in terms of the buying stuff and sending it into each expedition or whatever it is. So is it like a kind of each person on the team has very specific roles, kind of kind of like Phasmophobia doesn't, but I think everyone falls into those roles, like the person who always stays in the van or whatever like that. Whereas
I think anyone can be the bellman, anyone can be a diver. You can make that decision in your team. I don't think you need to specify the roles. It's just that who's going to be the person that goes in, because if something could go really wrong and you might need the bellman to kit up. Of course, this would never happen in real life. It would be considered incredibly dangerous. But the third person could go, I'm coming in on like the emergency air line. So like, because that can happen as well. They'll have a small tank with them that will be like, if my umbilical goes, this tank literally gives me about 30 seconds more air to get back to the bell manually. And so, you could be that situation. But yeah, I don't think you'd need to specify roles. I think hopefully people would fall into them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they'd have to, because otherwise it would all fall apart, I guess.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Oh. So I first appreciate the fact that you can tell from your idea that you only play games, well, most of the time with 2 other people, and you guys always are looking for games that are multiplayer with 3 or more.
Yeah.
But obviously with Phasmophobia, there's the threat, or is there a threat in this? Like, is there a shark which can go on the hunt, like in Phasmophobia? Do you have ways of defending yourself, lethal, non-lethal, deterrence, or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you see?
It depends on how you want to theme it. I was imagining theming it more this way, because the reality is wildlife does not really pose a danger to deep sea divers. Like occasionally they get bumped and things like that accidentally. There was famously footage a couple of weeks ago of a swordfish charging a diver who was working on some oil pipes, and the swordfish getting stuck in his gear. So when they pulled him back up into the bell, the swordfish was still stuck there like this, right? So that only came out a couple of weeks ago. Yeah.
Tasty.
But that's the closest they'll ever come to being at danger from the wildlife. However, yeah, I was thinking skew it a little sort of almost sort of Cthulhu-y, in that you have giant squid and things like that that sort of come across as these scary things. And yeah, for sure, you would then say you can buy the harpoon gun, and hell, if you manage to hook the big fish down there or something like that and get it back with you, you get even more money, and it also acts as a deterrent. Equally, yeah, like things like you could electrically put like something on your suit that electrically charges you, so if something tries to grab you, you can press a button and it shocks it and releases you, so you can try and get back to the bell.
I could imagine a really good scenario where you come across a pirate ship and it's haunted, or there are sirens hanging about, and so you've got to take on the supernatural.
Find out what ghost is inside it.
Fits the Lovecraftian theme quite nicely, and it makes everything, especially like with the old sort of steampunk, everything is mechanical and brass and like old diving suits anyway. So I think it works to the theme.
I'm glad you brought up horror, because I feel like when you were describing it initially, the first thought I had was it's not exactly Lovecraftian, but have you seen the movie Sphere? Based on that
yeah,
where they go down to but the idea of just like a team of people at the bottom of the ocean, and it's not just going to be wildlife that's there. Like there's something else. There's some other kind of threat, which is pretty frightening. I think
for sure.
That sounds exciting.
Is there a chance they'll find the rift and then you'll just see a kaiju come out, or is that a bit too much?
Just really going to cross the...
Like originally, it started as like, I learned to dive a year or so ago. It started with that element and like something that surprised me. Like so I only learned to dive down to like 18, 20 meters down, which is like the first level of it's 18 meters to be clear. The first level of diving, that's your limit in terms of safety, in terms of where you should be diving without, what's considered, the qualification system. But anyway, at 18 meters, that's enough in the UK at least for there to be significantly less light. So you get that awesome kind of dark twilight blurring effect of things, right? So when it's almost dark in the right light settings in the evenings, and all the bushes and everything just start to become sort of like waving grays and blacks and things like that, right? Yeah. So you get down to the bottom of the sea at that point, and you have the current moving these big kelp balls and things like that in this sort of slow, ghostly way. It's just like, for me, it makes, gives me a hard on.
That sounds incredible.
I love that shit. I'm like, dude, this is fucking crazy. Like you feel literally like you're in this sort of space-like spectral realm, and the current is just pulling you along gently as you're flying sort of through this space. And for me, like that was like something I wanted to capture. And because there is also the other thing about diving that I personally find very zen, but I also understand why people don't like, is because most of diving is keeping yourself alive, like watching your dials, checking your weight and your buoyancy, constantly concentrating on, if I mess up here, I'm going to drown, and for me, like that focus is really nice. And it's a very clarifying feeling. And so I wanted to try and capture this idea of like, you may only be able to see sometimes a foot, 2 feet in front of you, and you've got to keep your mind focused and not panic. And like, this something to do with that.
So is that kind of an element of it that you like, that constant actively aware of your dials and things, like almost like a flight sim style, like the idea of having to check your meters and things, like, is that something that you're imagining to be in the game? Like, you have to be constantly checking this stuff to...
That would be the Bellman, right?
Yeah. So that would be... Okay. It really depends on the way, the direction we want to take it, in terms of either a very practical approach to things like that, really, I think the feeling that you achieve by doing that is what I want to try and capture. And I think the idea of going for more of a dark, semi-supernatural feeling would achieve a much more sort of this almost alien feeling you get when you're at the bottom of the sea. Because you feel like you're in space. Like it's sort of an abyss, it's very famously written about. Yeah, that's what I think.
Got a couple of thoughts here. Is this obviously this is first person? I assume you're imagining it's first person. Could this make a good VR game? Because it's the very nature of putting a helmet on. You can have your what came to mind was checking your wrist, checking your dials, and having to constantly like look at your hand. But then obviously if you've got the Bellman, but I'm at odds about the Bellman, because will that be as fun to be the Bellman compared to the two divers?
Well, I was going to say...
Is there a risk that no one's going to want to be the Bellman because it's like, it's too much pressure. I have to keep you all alive, and I want to go and spear the fish with the harpoon.
Nice. I think if we go for a more unrealistic approach, that the divers outside of the Bellman's room, which is basically the van from Phasmophobia, they don't have the information. They can't see their oxygen. They can't see the pressure levels. They can't see, there's a fucking giant squid right next to you, get out of there. Like, I think they're going into the unknown, and the unknown extends to how much even they have before they have to run away, or how much time they have left before they have to come back or whatever. I think that could be really cool. Again, ultra unrealistic, because they would have all the information ready for them. But it, A, makes the Bellman much more interesting, and B, I guess makes it way more terrifying if you're at the bottom of the ocean. You don't know how much time you've got left. You've just got some walkie-talkie voice in your ear, just like, you've got 50%, okay? You've got 40%. Fucking run.
I think the idea of the Bellman could be quite good. Obviously, giving the players less information and giving one player all the information. And as we're going unrealistic, we can sort of add components into that. Like a basic sonar, and you're like, I'm picking something up. I'm picking movement up 50 meters ahead of you. And these two other players can't see anything. And he's like 40 meters.
There'll be matter floating across their vision. With the whole the first person perspective, I'm imagining like almost their field of view is reduced further because you get the edges of the mask or whatever they're wearing on the front of their eyes. So
and sound isn't really a thing. You just hear your breathing.
The sound will be. In fact, you could do crazy stuff with sound, but I imagine it's incredibly complicated. But you could, because you can hear underwater. It's just that often all you can hear is currents and swishes and swashes and things like that. And I guess you could do a couple that are just sort of like pre-recorded. I was thinking, in terms of proximity-based sound in current could be really interesting, but God knows how that would work. Occasionally you could have like a. And the sound of like a something big flicking its tail and then sort of moving away into the distance.
Nice.
That quite famous
It's
sound.
The breathing out sound effect in Phasmophobia that you always fucking hear, or like just a creaky
exactly.
And you're like, what the fuck was that?
The ambience will be there. The ambience is very, very important. That constant tone of something, and what that tone is will very much be able to, I think, dictate the feeling of, what the player's feeling like right there as well. So one thing I just sort of want to clear up. Obviously, with Phasmophobia, the goal is to identify the ghost. And in this, if we're going to a wreck and we want to get treasure, is that like one of many types of mission you want to do? Is there like repair jobs and then that's the goal? But there is
other threats out there that could delay that? Is it timed?
So before we started almost immediately leaning into the supernatural element of it, which I actually really like immediately I'm like, yeah, there's actually more I think about it. Yeah, the more that's exactly, I think, more exciting than I originally imagined it, like almost like a fishing the Barents Sea kind of simulator, like very, I like my simulator games a lot. And originally I was like, you literally are making money and then that allows you to buy a new ship, which is bigger. And then you can have like more, equipment and larger, you eventually get submarines, like mini subs and stuff like that. Like very much just build your farm kind of farming simulator-esque, make money to make money sort of thing. But now I don't really know. Like I think ideally, it would be stuff like, if it's going to be a supernatural element, more supernatural inspired missions, like rather than, just simple money making, then perhaps.
I think the Lovecraftian sort of theme and the steampunk style that you get from that, I think because it limits the technology that they can carry, you're obviously limited by that. If you go around with submarines and, thermal cameras and then you're like, I can see everything anyway. Mm-hmm. So, the threat becomes minimal. The threat is that you can't detect these things. You can only get hints that thing is out there, that exists. So like there's a guy on the sonar, he's like, again, 50 meters away. They're both blind. They can't really see. And then they only see like a black blob, and you're like, yeah, that's the thing. And you're like, okay, well, let's try and negate that, whether it's getting inside a wreck, but then there's other things in there. Like, is it like on in your mind, there's $5,000 worth of salvage in there. How much can we get? And we can only carry this much.
I'm conscious of it not just becoming Subnautica is the other thing.
Yeah,
that's which I love.
I was just going to say, it's the flip side. It's a sci-fi environment. You've got all the cool gear, and then you've got alien underwater creatures that then can be more aggressive than, say, a swordfish.
I was going to ask about Subnautica. So Subnautica is a survival game in the underwater, but I was going to ask because you were saying that 18 meters is when stuff starts getting really misty and like the pressure is. It sounds extremely forgiving now that you mention that 18 meters is the limit. Whereas in Subnautica, you're going down to like 500 and nothing is happening. You can see everything perfectly fine.
Yeah. So, I mean, the visibility is basically a big thing in diving. So visibility of distance in water. And that's why people go and dive in places like Egypt and places like that, is because they have the right conditions for you to be able to see a very long way. The maximum, I think, roughly you're going to hope for in diving in Egypt in terms of visibility is about 30 meters. So you'll be able to see 30 meters underwater, right? Average in the UK is probably about 2 or 3 meters.
Shit.
So I mean, how
see a shopping cart go past.
So you really are. And then as soon as you hit the floor as well, like you do not want to touch the ground or rocks or wrecks or anything because they all have a layer of silt on them, which is slightly heavier than water, but not that much heavier. So as soon as you hit it, it just plumes up and then just hangs in the water for hours. So like you can literally follow a diver in the water usually just by following their silt trail. But visibility in something like Subnautica is ideal. Also, there's another element.
Gamified.
Exactly. There's another element of water filters the spectrum of light. So the deeper you go, the less colors you lose. One of the first colors you lose is red. So immediately, so a lot of diving cameras, like recreational diving cameras, will have a grade in them that automatically boosts all reds to make it look more like it would if it was on the surface. But unfortunately, the reality is the deeper you go, you lose more and more and more color. So there's that to consider as well. But I don't really know
you're making the dev really easy here. Just quickly, it's like, okay, so we don't actually really need to make much because it's all going to be kind of murky. We just need to have some really good shaders. That's our key.
If it's like a Lovecraftian kind of, if it's almost like steampunky, you could have like these little goggles where you're switching in different filters to see things. Like, so in terms of like obviously you started off very, very much like a sim and quite realistic, and we're starting to shed that away by the sounds of it. Are you imagining now we're really going down into the depths of the ocean to see there basically for different like the point where it becomes like, I don't know if you like if you've been diving quite a bit now, like do you ever feel at all kind of frightened about the idea of what's down there, like even if it's not going to hurt you, but like something looming out of the blackness?
I'm frightened of being frightened, if you know what I mean.
Right,
So it's not the act of what I'm doing that scares me. It's if I do lose it down here, then that is what's going to kill me. So it's, I personally relish the feeling of controlling myself, I suppose. It's a bit weird. But
is that something that we can tap into though in the game? Like that idea of like, fuck, if I start panicking, I'm fucked.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
Well, I was thinking
controlling that, it's satisfying.
If the diver has next to no information about their own personal, oxygen level, etc., maybe again there's a pre-recorded sound where you think like, fuck, did I just hear like the oxygen tank just click where it's like on 10% low, and then they start rushing back, and it's like the Bellman is like, no dude, you've got like 75% left, what are you doing?
That'd be a great way to do it, actually.
So different things, like they just hear like, did I just hear that noise, and why isn't the Bellman telling me about it? So they start rushing back. It's like, fuck no, and then they touch the floor, and then there's a smoke plume and no one can see anything.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the thing. Like if you move too much in an area, the silt is just going to get worse and worse and worse, which it would. Like you literally need to do the whole idea of like, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Like that's very much a thing in diving. It's all about methodology. Methodology of check your lines, check your rigs, is everything okay? Before you go in, you do a check, and you have your buddy check you as well, and you check each other's gear. Can I breathe through this? Everything like that. Like I always as a kid wanted to be an astronaut, and for me it's as close as the average person can get to it, I think, in terms of the presence of mind of your kit and the presence of mind of what you're doing in the water. Like is nice. It's interesting. But yeah, for sure.
So it reminds me of like everything we said so far. I mean, I thought this at the beginning when we were talking about like collecting salvage and stuff. It's very much like Hard Space Shipbreaker in terms of slow movement. So if you haven't played it, it's basically a shipbreaking game set in space. So you fly around it. Everything's very slow because of how you move in space. You have to cancel out any inertia you have by obviously thrusting in the other direction, so you don't just move around constantly. But it reminds me of that. So like you go in with a set of tools and you can bring in other equipment with you, but you go in with the equipment you need for that job. In Hard Space, you have a limited amount of time to scrap as much as you can. So I think in this, it would have to be different. But it reminds me of that where, hey, have you got the the bolt, the cutting tool? Have you got the slicing whatever tool we need?
Have you got the amantine blade we need to cut this particular kind of metal?
And
I've seen that game you're talking about. Yeah. It is very much like that. Because
it's so big, it's like one player takes that, the other player takes that. It's like, okay, well, we both need to work on this thing. It's like, are we trying to get through this bulkhead? Okay, so what do we need? Okay, we need this and this. If we both take one of these things, we can both get through. But
I like the idea of blasting charges, like something like that.
You can only carry so much as well. And maybe you have to go back and get stuff, which takes longer, and you have to. So
it's almost like a Tomb Raider underwater. They're raiding Pharaoh's tombs underwater. I quite like the idea of that.
But it could be that we can go through this door, but if we venture out into relative sort of unknown, we might find a different way in. But and we save those charges so we don't need to bring them with us. But then it's that exploration versus ease and what you know. And I think that could be interesting depending on how the levels are created, whether it's through just set designs or like a level of random generation where you design chunks of a ship and then we modularly like put them together so it becomes, a huge tanker. We can have different, because obviously they separate everything out with bulkheads, so we can just make the bulkheads shut and design the individual rooms. But like, okay, this has a chance of spawning, some electronics in it. And
getting onto that, can we talk a bit about objectives for the overall game and like obstacles, I guess, as well, or threats? Like, what are the main? Is it just kind of getting treasure, or are there different things? Are you kind of, is there like an element of you documenting what's like wildlife under there?
I think ultimately the driving force of why you want to play is, for me, the feeling you get when you look up at a wall of tools you've cut. Like, the same in Phasmophobia, when you see all your shelves filled with all the things you've bought and how competent you now are at solving problems. You know, that for me is probably the only driving force that I would need. Of like, man, isn't it going to be cool when we all get like the best like diving gear, and then like we blow the best like things open, and then like I know that kind of gives you quite a hard wall of like progression. It's like, well, once you've got everything, what's continued reason to do it? And I think we do need something else. But like, I mean, maybe time or something like that, doing it in a certain amount of time, something to make you want to play more.
What I was thinking was, are you actually looking for rare creatures, and you're actually trying to capture one of each kind of creature and take it back for study, and then it becomes also like fishing, and it's like, I got the 40 kilogram version of this fish, or I got the rare blue one of this.
I love fishing
creature
as well. So hell yeah.
Nice.
Yes. And yeah, like you say, I've got like the rare silver Cthulhu squid. And like, you know, it's like Cthulhu faced with like then just a cuttlefish back.
and like your ship could just have a large aquarium in it. So it's not anything gross, like they're all like stuffed and petrified and stuck on the wall. It's like, no, I've got, maybe I'm hunting to staff my aquarium with various creatures,
with crazy deep sea stuff, which, by the way, if you were pulled to the surface without pressurizing them, will just explode. That's why blobfish look like blobfish. So amazing. Blobfish under the water are actually a lot better looking. But if you pull them to the surface too quickly, they just all the nitrogen and air and things in their cells just expands and just makes them explode.
What the fuck?
So any deep sea fish, if you pull it up too quickly, that usually happens.
That's not nice. So my thing was similar to what James was going to say, but with an extra bit added on, was what if it's to do with collecting, but then you use the salvage missions to fund those collecting, because just collecting stuff doesn't make you money. And whether it's that, when we were talking about obviously making money and gathering tools and seeing this wall of tools, you could always do it where kind of Metroidvania, where as you unlock these new tools, you can go back to a site and now you have access to new areas, because before you didn't have the ability to cut through a bulkhead, but now you do. So now you can go back in and be like, okay, there's some stuff in there, I can sell that, and then we can get the tools to capture the big old silver Cthulhu shark, and you're like, great, thanks.
So it's a kind of campaign now where levels you can revisit and
sounds a bit like XCOM,
stuff.
this guy. It's sounding quite a lot like XCOM. I was told to mention it, but these guys have some similarities.
I mean, there's a timer.
But I completely agree. I really like that combination of ideas of like, there's this excitement of getting the biggest fish, because I think this kind of takes me onto something which I'm probably sure you guys have recognized, but I feel like there are like tenets to the human psyche, right? There are little hooks in all of us that for some reason always appeal to us. One of them, for example, would be the idea of surprise or not knowing what's in something. Right, I think that's a very human thing, to want to open things and see what's in it. You know, like why do we love opening packets of random cards? Like, what's that buzz? You know, like I want to see what's in here, and I think that's represented in fishing as well. Because when you pull a fish up, I think half of the fun is like, what is it? What have I got? You know, like you've put this line into this big abyss, into this dark pool of water. You got no real idea what's in there, and as you're pulling it up, you're like, there's something I've got, and there's a buzz there, and I think that like a lot of great games appeal to those like little hooks in us that sort of like just scratch that little like dopamine itch almost of like.
Oh, I mean, if it's like what Chris was saying, if it's like a Metroidvania and you see a door that you can't open, that's going to be scratching at the back of your mind for so long. I want to know
what's behind that door.
Yeah, and exactly. Now finally I have the adamantamite fucking drill or whatever the fuck it's called, and now I can bust it open, blow it open, finally.
Drill through this wooden door.
It's shit in there, but now I know.
I think it also lends into the other side of like the human psyche, which is we like to have everything complete set. So if with fishing, you're like, I've never caught a carp, and it's like, I want to catch a carp, and I want this thing. It's like with Animal Crossing, I want to get all the fossils. I want to complete the museum. I want to catch them all in Pokemon. It's like we have this thing where we want everything to be filled as it should be. And I think so you've got two hooks of not knowing what's behind there, but knowing that I can get there if I keep doing this thing and, over and over again, or however we want to do it. And also that I need to get in there to then catch this thing so I can then add it to my collection of animals or artifacts. And we can add that in as well. You can have, here's an artifact collection. Can you find them? They're hidden.
Yeah,
They might just be in plain sight. There might be hidden ones.
And then expansion pack, there's fucking aliens. Aliens down there.
Yeah.
With their white orbs. And you're like, oh shit. And the front cover could be 3 divers looking over the edge of an abyss with these big bright torches, and then this just fucking glowing ball coming up in front of them. And just
A
be
white
like,
Tic Tac, Smith.
oh,
It's all about the
finally.
Tic Tacs.
Yeah. Like, well, like in, what the fuck was it? It has a name that sounds like Guatemala, but it's not. The place off of the coast of New Mexico that they say they keep, all the fishermen keep seeing silver lights going down into the water and out of the water and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Will-o'-the-wisps.
Yeah, pretty much, but like big ones. And yeah.
Big old wisps.
Anyway, whatever those big glowy balls are, they're using them to look at something underwater.
Guadalupe.
You can get
Guadalupe, that's it.
Yeah.
Guadalupe.
Yeah.
To try and bring everything together, could it work perhaps as if, for example, like in Phasmophobia, like you were saying at the beginning, you have your houses and you're kind of selecting a house to be like, this is like, you'll read a little bit about the house and it will give you a bit of info, and then you go in and you figure out what's happened there.
Yep.
With this, could it be there are lots of different sunken ships, and that's what you're investigating? Perhaps
you could have like a research module kind of scenario. Like another element I really like is like there's a system in a game called Escape from Tarkov where you have a hideout.
Oh yeah.
And in that, basically, you have like tasks you can leave running that take actual time to accumulate. So like there's one called a scav box where essentially you pay some money and then a couple of guys will go out into the world of Tarkov, like this is what's meant to have happened, and loot stuff for you, and then they bring it back in exchange for the payment you gave them. They're like, here's what you get. So there's like a random chance. So I'm thinking for discovering new dive spots, you could almost have like a research desk thing that goes on that you pay a bit of money to, or put a couple of like clues into or something like that, and that will give you a random chance to discover new dive spots. I think you'll start with a few that's like like I say, you can go and find the lost city of Atlantis. You could go and find that, or like for example, you could go and dive through an underwater volcano or something interesting like that. But yeah, essentially dive spots are generated on a map, and then the players literally click them like in Phasmophobia, and you're there, and then bam, you're presented with the level.
Perhaps like in terms of also visiting these different areas, there's incentive to go there, not just to get the treasure and to perhaps even find out like what happened to the ships themselves, perhaps, but also you're going to get you're going to catalog different creatures depending on where you're going in the world.
Yeah, you have different flora and fauna, definitely. Yeah, for sure. So that would be a really nice way to do it. Like you have, this area is considered really dangerous to dive in, for example, as well. Or this area is very cold. You could be diving in the Arctic, for example. You need a special sort of warm layer to allow you to dive for longer there, or something like that as well.
So I definitely think when Smith mentioned Tarkov, the one thing I love about Tarkov is, and which sounds really weird, is the inventory management or lack of inventory. I think that kind of systems very much suits this game because you want to pick everything up, but you can't pick everything up. And you only have limited space, maybe, and you can research and go, I get 2 extra slots in my underwater holdall thing. But you can only fill that with so much, but you also need to take your kit with you. So I think that kind of management, like we're going in, what kit do we need to take? Okay, I'm going to fill up my slots with this. Some of this I know is, one-time use. So it doesn't matter if it fills up my slots because I know that I can use it once and then it's gone, and I can replace that with treasures or things that we find. And I think the research side of things with Tarkov is good as well, for maybe expanding kit where you're like, okay, so at the start we have 10 minutes worth of oxygen. Well, if we find enough research objects and artifacts, well, we can upgrade our kit to be 12 minutes of oxygen. So we now have this extra time and we can upgrade rather than just money equals new kit. I think there should be other routes to that, which I think just makes it a bit more replayable, and also just gives it another avenue of that other thing we were talking about of wanting to get everything.
Yeah.
If you give
Of
people
progression and
reason
completion.
to pick stuff up and reason to want to pick stuff up, then they're not just going in and being like, okay, we got the main thing, let's go. And it's like, hold on, there are other things we can get because we need that for that little research thing. And I think other goals, optional, yeah, but they also, just adds to the game a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
You got any other goals, James?
No. the only thing that I'm now at odds about with this whole collection thing is if there are three
You
of
brought
you.
it up.
I know, and now I'm second guessing it because we've got our. I feel like we're drifting away from the core idea of having the Bellman and the two divers. Does it negate the collection aspect? Is it like this is our collection, but I want this? I think thinking about the human emotions, is there like the selfishness of like, no, this is mine, this is my amulet, or this is my fish, I caught this.
And you can sabotage your mate and cut his airline whilst he's down there. Betrayal at the bottom of the sea.
I think in Phasmophobia it doesn't work that way, and I don't know why.
Well,
I don't think
you
it would
get a share
work
of
that way in
money at
this.
the end, and that's essentially
I think you work for the same company. That's like it's a unified goal. You're all going for the same reasons.
I think whatever's collected, the entire crew gets at the end of the mission, right? That makes sense. I
It's
like
a
the idea
collective
that there's a lobby that when you first start playing the game is totally empty. It's like this trophy lobby that is like there's empty shelves, there's empty areas, empty aquariums, all these different things. I think the only worry for me about this being like a multiplayer game is if one dude plays it a ton and he's like level 100, he's already got all of this equipment, he's got the entire collection, and then he plays a game with two like first-time players. Is he basically just going to carry the team by just bringing in all the equipment straight away?
You could fix that by making them be the level of the lowest. Like do you know how in MMOs where you scale based on what region you're in.
I always
you could
get
just do
frustrated
that
by that though. Like, I feel like you're then kind of getting punished, like for play. I mean, not to be like I am always the one who is the lower level, and people are having to come down to my level. But I feel bad for that person who's invested so much time to then be like, oh, I guess I'll stoop down to your level to spend some time with you. But I don't know if that's
their knowledge is worth more than anything they could bring. Like they're like, oh, if you as a new player could go down an avenue, they're like, don't go down there. You can't open that yet. And that's automatically you've learned something and you've already saved time. So that itself is, I think, enough because they're just trying to teach you how to play the game. And I don't know. Yeah, it's sometimes frustrating because you're like, oh, we'll come back to that. But it's also like they don't know what's in there. There's that the sense of you're just watching someone learn and experience what you did at the same time.
I feel like there's a satisfying way to solve that maybe is a
because the flip side of that is, don't worry about researching that or unlocking that. I can just buy that, and then they lose out on that. Feeling you felt when you were like, oh, I'm going to unlock this thing and I need this much. And they're like, no, I can just buy that.
There's something really unsatisfying for me, at least, if I'm playing with like one of the worst feelings I have in games, if I start a new MMO with someone or something, and then we'll play like the first 5 levels together and then I'll go offline for a day and I'll come back and they're like level 80 and they're just like fully geared. And then I just feel like, well, I don't really want to play. I want to play with you, but I don't really want to play with you because I've just lost out on that kind of experience now of just like doing these things with my friends.
Or they'll go through the motions and just carry you through the level, and you're like, I'm missing everything because I'm just being told or I'm being led through just so we can get to the good bit.
The one thing we haven't talked about that much yet is the Bellman.
Have we not?
What is the thing that's going to really want to keep people playing because in Phasmophobia, I feel like a lot of people want to stay in the truck because maybe like they might be a bit frightened by going into the house, or at least initially when they start playing it, or they
it
like
sounds
the feeling
like
of
going into the water is terrifying. Like I think there's going to be multiple people applying to be the Bellman.
Going back to like Smith's like initial point is that's also one of the things that should be like at the core of the game is that feeling of like, oh shit, I'm managing to control the situation and keep myself alive. That feeling that you want to get. How does the Bellman get that? Is it by managing other people and helping them stay alive that you get that?
So I think there's always someone, or even if you rotate through, you go, okay, well, I did it last time, you do it this time. There's always someone who wants to be the man in the chair. Like if you say, okay, so Smith's out there, I hear over the radio, can I get more line? And I have to release more, hose out because he can't physically move forward more. And he's like, okay, thanks. And then or it's like a little bit more, it's all about communication. And you're like, okay, coming up, I've got a ping on my sonar 30 meters to your west, and then you're like, okay, he's like, keep an eye on that, and you're like, okay. He's like, you've got 5 more minutes of oxygen remaining before I have to bring you back in. And so it's all about the constant communication. And I think it's having to manage all these things. Well, there probably are shit tons more of things that you have to manage that we don't know about yet, but having to manage all these things is quite taxing. And I think you'll do it, you'll be like, fuck, that was a lot to take in. I'm going to now do the more relaxing job of going out next time, and someone else can swap in for me. Or some people really enjoy that constant
more relaxing,
mental,
but dangerous,
fucking like seesaw of being like, oh fuck, okay, pulling all these levers and things. It depends what we give them and what we don't give the players, because the players are going to be constantly asking questions of what's my depth, what's my time of oxygen left, what's in front of me. We know, maybe we have a sonar, and we even if it's just a top-down overview of the wreck, and we can see roughly where they are. We're like, okay, in 2 bulkheads time, you turn right, you should be in the the storage room. If we give the players nothing, then it requires the Bellman to be a solid someone who can provide good communication and constant sort of levels of interaction.
It's essentially squad leader in squad, I think. Yeah. Okay. And that is the value. I mean, what we could also do is we could gamify the umbilical element even more. So obviously, usually at the moment, I think they'll send down their communications lines. So they'll have a physical communication line. They'll have a hot water supply to keep them warm at the depth that goes into their suit. They will have their air mix, being depending on what that is. That air mix, I'm not quite sure how it works with saturation diving, but for example, with scuba diving, you would change what's in your tanks based on what depth you're at. In terms of, so there's something quite famously known as nitrox and heliox, for example, which are helium oxygen and nitrogen oxygen mixes. Because of the way that pressure affects your body's physiology, you absorb oxygen at different rates at different depths. So basically these other gases are used to balance the amount of oxygen, so you don't oversaturate yourself with oxygen and get what's called oxygen poisoning, which is where you can actually die of it. So it's very complicated. But anyway, what you could do with the umbilical instead is, we could do things like if a player's character is starting to panic, so say there's a psychological element to it of like, I feel like panic is probably a good one to focus on in terms of like they start breathing harder, so they're using more air, and then they start like things like that. You could have the umbilical have a line directly into the body. So for example, the Bellman could inject some sort of like diazepam, for example, which calms the diver back down again. Equally, you could make it as remedials health potions, so your team could buy like 3 health potions before you go down that the Bellman can then inject into a certain player's umbilical to heal them again. So it's a very much literally a support tank relationship in that sense. And of course, with giving the Bellman most of the technology so they can see things really clearly, but like you say, the player only has, say, a very bright torch. I just think that the fear that could come from having a useless Bellman desperately trying to describe the direction of this giant shark would just create some terrifying and hilarious moments of just like, where is it? It's on your right. Why right? What do you mean?
It's over there. Where's over there? That's always a classic. He's over there by the tree. We're in a forest. It's like, oh great, thanks. I think the another good thing is where like it's all about communication. So if at certain points the Bellman, say you walk as a diver, you go into a room and it acts like a Faraday cage, and all of a sudden you lose communication or all kind of all statistics of that player, and you're like, I have no clue what's happening. And then he leaves that, and all of a sudden everything's tanked, and you're like, oh fuck! And it's just all about those quick reactions. Which, okay, I need to get this over there.
Load in the physical health thing, pull the lever down, just fires the health thing down into his tube, like something like that could be really fun, especially if it's got VR elements, which I think it totally
especially if it's VR. I think the issue with the one issue with VR is, especially with environments like underwater and space, is because they restrict your movement. And in VR, you don't get that feedback. So you're moving your hand, and either the character has to go along with it, which feels unrealistic because you're in water, you're trying to sort of go against, or the hand moves slower, so it immediately sort of pulls you out.
Yeah, that's true.
From that immersion. So I think there's different challenges depending on, like, one, going VR doesn't solve all the interaction issues. It creates other issues completely. I think immersive wise for the player, just being in an actual headset feels like you're in, wearing a little snorkel mask. But I think there are issues.
For me, the when I first tried the HTC Vive, there was a demo where you could sit in the water next to a reef, and you had all of these orange jellyfish slowly drift over you. And there's also another one where you sit on stand on the bow of a ship and see a whale go by you. The visibility and the color are not true to life, but that feeling of like looking up and seeing something move through the air in front of you is very accurate to diving. Like that is one of the feelings that's like, this is really weird. Like we're used to seeing birds whip by the sky above us, and that's about it, but when you're physically, like, you feel small, right? Which is something I, as a 6'5" dude, is unusual for me to look up and see a creature slowly shifting around above me is a strange experience. But absolutely. It doesn't need to be VR. It's just with diving games, I feel it works so well because of the nature of putting the headset on. I would love to see it. However, I've also I like VR games, but I rarely use it because of just simply using the hardware is taxing, until it gets to the point where I can wear a VR headset that's as light and easy to wear as my glasses. I don't think I'm going to play that many VR games, basically, that's a horrible truth because I love it as a technology. I think in order, if I wanted to get this made, I certainly wouldn't make VR a requirement. More of a, if this will work,
it's going to take a while to get there.
Yeah.
I mean, like Phasmophobia again, it has VR. You don't have to play it in VR.
Oh, it does, doesn't it? Yeah. I think that feeling of, for me at least, and like that feeling of something in the depths or something moving over you that's huge or beneath you, like the idea that just in real life, the idea of that there are things in the ocean that are so huge that make you feel tiny. Like it gives me the same feeling of, like, when there's like a huge thunderstorm or something, and then all of a sudden you're just like, fuck, I'm actually really small, and it's quite...
Yeah, I am insignificant. I'm a clever monkey, but I am a small one.
Mm.
And that kind of... That leads me to another question, but actually before, Chris, I just want to make sure that you didn't have something else to add to that before I change the subject.
No, mine was... It's just that I think with this, you just got to nail the atmospherics. And I think like the small things, like how when you see light shafts come through water, say you're doing that and you can see some light, and it flickers, it turns off and then comes back on. You're like, something just swam over me.
Oh, yeah, that.
I don't know what that was.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
So I'm just not going to look up, and I'm going to hope that
I'm not going to look
it
up.
was good.
Yeah.
It's just like, but like I've got one source of light, and then all of a sudden it turns off, and then turns back on. You're like, well, something just swam by.
I mean, I even love the idea of the Bellman. Like, they might have an idea of what it was, and if their communication is bad, and they're like, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it, boys. Just keep walking.
But what was it though? What was it? And they're like, oh, your oxygen's pretty low. It's like, great. What was it?
It's better that you don't know.
That leads me on to the other thing I wanted to talk about, which I don't think we've discussed so far: combat. Like, I assume we haven't thought about that, and I assume it's not going to be in there. But I feel like we should just kind of lock it down either way. Is that something? Are you ever going to have spear guns? Is there any? Is it like Thalassophobia?
I feel like you have to.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's kind of a moderate threat kind of environment. Like, I don't really want to go like full combat, full gore. Like, I don't want people to be able to shoot through levels, if you know what I mean. Like, let's not bother with process here. I've just got a big underwater gun and that's it. For me, it's like, definitely like spear guns to, like, catch the odd creature. And also perhaps like a diver's dagger, I think, is very iconic, even though like the vast majority of divers don't carry knives like that because it's really dangerous if one of them accidentally like gets through your kit. So this is actually one of these famous sort of bullshit things is that a lot of new divers will buy like one of those big diving knives, you know, because it's like, when I walk out of the surf, I've got my suit on and my leg holstered diving dagger. I look so badass. So a far better tool to buy is a line cutter. So, you know, it's basically like a metal bar with like an indent in it that you can put like ropes and hoses and things, and basically you pull it and it will cut through the line. Because the whole point of them is if you're ever fouled in any kit or any like fishing nets or anything like that, and you need to get up and out of whatever's going on, then the knife is to cut you out of that sort of scenario. But famously, obviously, I think in the game, having a diver's knife that you can say like stab a marauding magic shark with in the gill or something, like, you know, have one of those almost quick time sort of like press F now, and could be quite exciting. And I don't really want to, like, I don't like killing things and killing animals in real life. And I'm very much, you know, pro animals. But equally, I think if we make it supernatural enough and not make it like, let's go hunt minke whales, you know, like, I'm actually, you know, a patron of a whale and dolphin charity as well. So that's really got to avoid that. But like, you know what I mean? Like I think like moderate
I think
threat.
it should be preventative. I think you should be able to kill them. I think if anything,
defensive.
it just dissuades them for some time.
Exactly. Yeah. Like electric shotguns, net guns, and things like that. You know, like
yeah.
And if you do have a knife that will help, that will sometimes dissuade some things away from you, then it's in a way it's almost going to feel worse if you do come up against something like a kraken. I don't know, it was something where you're just like, well, I can't stab this with my tiny knife or with my like I just have to get out of here. You're going to feel really, really kind of insignificant then.
Definitely.
Chris, sorry.
The Tarkov inventory system leans heavily towards that. You're like, okay, I've got my harpoon gun. I have one harpoon spare. One's loaded in, one spare.
Yeah.
I have to be, even if it's just a deterrent, I have to be 100% sure that this is the shot I want to take, because it might just be swimming close and then by, and then you're like, okay, why did I shoot at that? I missed anyway, but why did I shoot? Now I've only got one.
And I think we could go one
he's
up.
got a spare, but
I think we go one up on the Tarkov system as well. What you mean by the Tarkov system, I'm guessing for listeners, is sort of physical ammunition, physical limitation to it. It's not just
an inventory space slot.
Yeah, you have 18 harpoons, and you know it's like, right, you have to put these somewhere in the diving bell. Or how about you know, we go one more where inside the diving bell there are mounts for everything, because that. Personally, I love that shit, you know, like in the old Hitman game where you had like an area where you had all the guns you'd bought laid out on your wall and things like that. Like, you know, if you can design the interior of the diving bell and the saturation chamber to have like literal hooks where each harpoon goes, and it's like, right, we've got 3 harpoons loaded in. It's like, right, I've got one. It's in my gun. Like, all right, I've got one on my back.
Nice.
Let's do this, you know, like I really enjoy that as well. So yeah, I for sure, I love that system.
I think there's a really nice way we could have objects like a flare gun, for example, be used as a defensive mechanism, as well as like, oh, I'm going to light up this area. But this idea that maybe the more stuff you collect, the more like, maybe I can just use that to bop the shark on the nose, or I've got this, I've got like a camera and I can use the flash to
for sure
to like stun something.
Every animal at depth is going to have eyesight adjusted to extreme low light. So yeah, any kind of bright light would be an excellent way to describe why it's going like that, you know, flare gun especially. And I mean, even then, like you could actually look at how light influences the creatures in each area. You know, it almost becomes a like, I can't name a certain game. You know, there's plenty of games where like planning your light and your like a Astroneer, for example, where you also sort of place tethers to keep your oxygen down. Same sort of thing with light. You know, you could do like, right, at this depth there's such large things moving around, we need to make sure we don't move outside the light as much as we can, you know, and perhaps that gives us another layer of this almost like fear.
And there's
element.
also that thing where you've got bioluminescence at that sort of depth, and you're like, oh, there's one of our lights is over there, and you just see it move, and you're like, that's not one of our lights.
Exactly. I mean, that'd be
I don't
great,
know what
right?
that is, but
I think
fuck
also if you, this kind of leans quite heavily into phasmophobia, but if you go on an expedition, there's also an element of finding, well, what creature could be down here, and I guess they also react differently to different tools if you're trying to prevent them. So maybe you're placing loads of lights everywhere and you're like, great, this is going to dissuade this thing. Oh fuck, it's this one that doesn't care about bright lights. If anything, it's attracted to it.
It's blind, and it just senses movement in the current, you know, and you all have to stand stock still instead, you know, like,
or even it sees the light and it's like, great light, I'll head towards that. So you're like trying to dismantle all your other lights really quickly so it doesn't come towards you. So maybe there's certain tools that can really heavily fuck you up if you take them on this expedition. You get bad luck. Like, oh, it's this thing. Shit.
Everyone lights out. Yeah. Oh man, that'd be so cool. I love that idea.
Maybe the Bellman literally just pulls a lever and just shuts all the lights off.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And he has to, so another thing the Bellman can do in with saturation divers is if they ever get in real trouble, they get stuck on something, he can literally, or she can literally haul them back in by their umbilical.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, it's like, right, everyone shut the lights and Bellman, you got to drag us back because like we don't know where the hell we are right now and we can't turn the lights on.
Just reaching for the treasure and it's like,
go on, get it.
But they can actually pull them back one at a time. They can't pull back both people or all the other people. So there's other people that are just standing there, just like trying to stay silent. Like, why are you pulling that guy back? Pull me back.
He's holding the treasure.
Honestly, I feel like most of this you could take away all of the supernatural element and make it all just mundane tasks, and I think it would still be really good.
Yeah,
like because it is. If the Bellman's the focus, then that element of fear and everything comes from just them trying to communicate everything. You could just be like, I need you to go down and press a button, and then the whole like. Trying to find the button, trying to like do it in the time.
It's like keep talking, nobody explodes.
The thing that I think really works about like the Lovecraftian element is that, first of all, like Chris said, you have like it lets you kind of have slightly more rudimentary technology, and you are limited by that in a way, and also that like you could still have this like there's still that threat, that element of something really weird could appear. Like it might not. You might do like a couple of missions. You might not see anything particularly weird, but there could be something really strange out there, like really dark and really dangerous. And I think that like that extra layer of fear, I think could be something really cool. I don't know. So Tom, where do you think we are at the moment? Could you give us a quick rundown of what the game is so far?
It's a weird mix of, well, it's not even a weird mix. It's a good mix of like, it's Phasmophobia, Subnautica, Tarkov, and, oh no, I think it's just those actually, where you've got
the museum from Animal Crossing.
A museum from Animal Crossing, and Mega Man as well. I think there was some Mega Man in there. Because,
Metroid.
The Metroidvania.
Yeah.
Sorry, I immediately think of Mega Man X for some reason.
I was struggling to make a link there. I was like, I'll take your word for it, Mega Man, sure.
There it is. It's a multiplayer diving expedition game of serious risk and somewhat realism. I think it's a lot more realistic than Subnautica. Where you've got the Bellman, who is monitoring all of the stats, the maps, the sonar, to make sure that these divers can get to safe depths, to discover and uncover hidden relics on the ocean floor. But also, there might be a giant squid Cthulhu thing in there.
There's always that threat.
And as the divers, you're using your tools to identify the threats, but also navigate the wrecks. And as the Bellman, you're monitoring their status, making sure they don't die, but also trying to guide them through the level properly. And I think it's a game, it's mainly a game of communication, finding a good Bellman. There's always going to be one person on the team who is terrible at the Bellman. And I kind of like the idea that it's random who gets the Bellman. Like, I guess you could say that anyone that could be the Bellman when they start the level. It's literally like, oh, there's two suits, whoever jumps into them, you're in. But maybe like Dead by Daylight, where it just flashes on the screen, Bellman. And it's like, oh, fuck, I'm the Bellman. I'm so fucking bad at this. But then you just have to play the level like that. It's like, shit, okay, we have to do it with this guy. Fuck. And you use your tools to... I kind of want it to be giant squid and Cthulhu creature, just because... Some expeditions you go on them and it's like maybe there's nothing there at all, but the anticipation of there being some fucking mega creature out there could be terrifying. And then you finish the level, it's like, oh cool, great, well we just got all this money, perfect, we're going to the next level, and it's literally Cthulhu who's out there.
Cthulhu's there.
There goes. And you have to try and do the level like that. Sounds, I think it's really cool. I think it's a sort of that Phasmophobia I need a new Phasmophobia because I'm running out on that game.
But like, also there's that extra layer of you're searching these wrecks to amass gold, which you then use to purchase new technology and items to help you search wrecks better and things. But then also you're amassing this collection of creatures, right? Of strange, otherworldly, Cthulhuan creatures
and relics, yeah. And like your lobby is
and you
slowly
could send them
filling
to a
up.
science fair to make some money and stuff like that. You know, like when they reveal King Kong and he's all chained up. You know that? Like, here's my TED talk, a giant fucking squid in the vat. You know, P.T. Barnum, yeah. Like, exactly.
So, Alex, how does that sound to you so far? Are you happy with the direction the game is?
I do, yeah. To be honest, I never even thought about the supernatural element to it, but I actually really think it fits incredibly well because of when you're down there and when you see what it's like, it does feel very like you can see where the inspiration for these themes and ideas has come from, you know, from the natural world. What's also really interesting about Cthulhu and octopus and things like that, and like the whole like tentacled creatures things, is they're one of so octopus. I don't know whether you've watched. There's some really good documentaries about living with octopus available at the moment. Octopus are one of our most distant relations in terms of animals. So we are related to, I think, something like 95% of all. We are genetically identical to about 95% of all creatures and all life on Earth, right? But great apes and chimps and things like that were about, I think, 99% similar to, in some respects, to monkeys. Anyway, with octopus, our nearest closest relation is a sort of prehistoric grass frond that grew underwater, right? That is our nearest, closest relation. So a very, very, very long time ago, cephalopods and octopus split off from us genetically. So they are about as close to alien as you can get. And so with Cthulhu obviously being inspired by sort of cephalopods in its style and all that sort of stuff, it actually makes a huge amount of sense in terms of, how different we are and how alien we are to each other. So I always find that really interesting.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool.
Tom, would you play this? I feel like I know the answer.
I mean, yeah, it sounds, if I can find a good team, sure, absolutely. Like, I think it's just a question of making sure that whoever is the Bellman is good at being the Bellman, because otherwise, although having a shit Bellman would also
it could be
super
fun with a shit Bellman. Yeah. As long as there's still some way for people to get back up, you know, like if you have a shit Bellman, you're not 100% going to die. Like you still have a chance to get back up there with some loot or whatever.
You get your knife out, cut both the lines, and go back up into the ship. Cheers, guys. Yeah.
I'd rather cut my line.
Relaying back to the Bellman, being like, the dial is up on the left. I've told you so many times. Like that's a great interaction.
I like the idea of it needs to be that the divers are able to complete the task regardless, but a good Bellman massively helps. And I think that's really good. And I also, man, after playing this game for like 80 hours with a team who's also joined me the entire time, the efficiency of the entire thing has got to be satisfying. It has to be.
Definitely.
Like completing missions within 5 minutes would be awesome. I think something that needs to be done, like the opposite of Phasmophobia in a sense, where Phasmophobia, you can spend 20 minutes in a house and it makes no difference, 30 minutes in a house, whatever. I think, like you were saying, where the longer you're in a place, if you're kicking up sand and all of this shit and it starts getting really murky, I think it eventually gets to a point where you can't complete it because you can't see anything. All the instruments are, you know, getting fucked up by all of the shit that you've kicked up. And it then becomes like that we've wasted our time here. We can't do anything. We can't see anything. We can't, like, radar isn't picking anything up now. So you just have to abandon the mission.
Yeah. Come back another time.
Too long. Or maybe something else out there is kicking up all the sand.
Tom's just been eaten by a giant squid. Yeah, I saw him. Yeah, just took him. Yeah, he's gone. He's gone. All right, we'll come back. Yeah.
We're leaving. Bye. And then I lose all my gear.
James, would play?
Yeah, 100% would play. I love it. I have this vision in my head of just slowly walking forwards, low visibility, and then suddenly seeing one of the Kraken's tentacles lying just on the seabed in front of you because he's asleep. If you bump it, it's going to go what the fuck, and just wrap you up and carry you off.
And then you look down and realize you're in a minefield.
Yeah. Or you look down and you're on the edge of a cliff and you're like, oh shit. I'm down for that. Love it.
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah. I think the aesthetic lends itself very much to those sort of like sudden, like things going across in front of you. The fuck was that?
I really like it. Like the theme and the gameplay style fits. I think just slap Thalassophobia on it, the fear of deep water, and you've got a game there.
Oh my god! I mean, geez, that would also sell off
That's
the back of Phasmophobia as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I've got a question. How hard is it to make this? Like, what do you think?
Well, one dude made Phasmophobia.
Oh, very,
very
100%. Very, yeah.
Really?
What makes it so hard?
Tom, just because one guy made a game doesn't know how long he worked on it for.
Yeah, but
one guy made Stardew Valley. It took him 4.5 years.
Right.
Well, this is what I'm saying. So outside of how long it would take one man, not like if you. How many people would it take to make something like this? What kind of challenges would there be? What kind of technology kind of challenges would there be? Do you anticipate? I think
the question is, could it be done?
Networking.
Could it be made now by any team? I think, absolutely. Because like there's there are games like that already.
The quicker it will probably get done. And the more money you have to throw it, the quicker it will get done as well.
I think it could exist easily.
Does money just translate into... Does money translate into just hiring more people to do the work, or is there like tools that you'd have to buy that would help you do the work as well?
Money translates into either having more people to do it or more experienced people, but less. Like if you don't need 5 guys working on a networking solution, if you have one guy who's done it for 12 years and he knows what he's doing and he's like, do it this way. I mean, look at if you look at Fall Guys, if you look at the credits of the networking server teams, like 20 people.
It also depends how accurate you want your audio to be, your Foley. Are we going to have to hire you, Alex, to go down diving to record some of this stuff for us? I mean, that's
interesting.
We've got a budget for that, surely.
Guys, I strictly shoot in like the Caribbean though, or somewhere, I just can't get better. The water sounds better. The water sounds better in the Caribbean. The quality of the sound I'm getting is so much better.
That's right. That's what I heard. Yeah.
That sort of thing. That's all they're getting. Like, the final game comes out, and every so often you can just hear this guy out.
In terms of the actual the costs of tools and things, like I know there's there are lots of different there's a lot of custom tools that people will build to make games, but like the this is the thing that we haven't really discussed that much, is actually like getting into, like on this podcast at all, it's just like actually getting into game dev. But like at the very base level, two of the kind of the greatest engines at the moment for indie games, Unreal and Unity, are both completely free to just pick up and start making stuff on. And there's a lot of like other costs, I guess, that come with that, right? Like in terms of hiring people and building your own tools and stuff. But in terms of actually just like opening up an engine and just starting work on at least a prototype, it doesn't cost anything.
Yeah, I mean, you could do it. You could close this podcast down and start doing it yourself now. Like, it's not exactly...
You listening right now.
Don't take this idea, though, you bastards.
No. Well, okay, we'll change it to Alex Smith's Thalassophobia.
Alex Smith's diving adventure with friends. Great.
Okay, Alex, thank you very much for joining us. That was a long one. I'm sorry we took up so much of your time, but I think it was just so fascinating. We couldn't stop talking about it.
I'm glad you guys found stuff to like in it. Thanks for it's very enjoyable for me.
I'm glad that it wasn't a deck builder.
Whilst you're in the bell tower, there is a full solitaire simulator you can do. That
could be an Easter egg.
That'd be one of the collectibles.
Thanks very much for joining us. Thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Until then, goodbye.
Bye.
What a strange bye.